The company published its first magazine, Birmingham Christian Family, in 2000. Since then, similar productions have been added in other markets, including Nashville, Tennessee. Laurie grew up in Hoover, graduated from Vanderbilt University, go Vols, and pursued a career in broadcast journalism, serving as a medical reporter and morning news anchor here in Birmingham. Later, she developed and implemented public relations and advertising campaigns for a national health corporation. She is a 2021 graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Entrepreneurship Program. Laurie and her husband, Adam Franklin, are the proud parents of 5 sons. Please join me in giving a warm chamber welcome to Laurie Stroud Franklin.
Good morning. Thank you guys for being here, getting up early. As I was preparing to speak with you, I took some time to think about how prayer has been and is a part of my life. It's really been a part of my life journey. And this is one of the images that came to mind to me. This photograph hung in my home growing up, and it also hung in my grandmother's home in Minnesota. And I was trying to think back about exactly where it was in the home, and I really couldn't come up with that. I had to ask my mom and dad. But what I did remember was just the visual of this, of head bowed, hands folded, and what looks like a very simple meal. And it really illustrated to me visually, I think, and even in those early years, of giving thanks for God's provision, whether it's big or small. As a child, I prayed before meals and at bedtime, and that's probably my really first encounters, with prayer. The repetition of prayer, before meals and at bedtime, hands folded, head bowed. It was expected, and it became a habit. It didn't feel right to me, not to pray before I ate or pray before I go to bed. As a little girl, I can remember turning my prayers into a list of every person that I could possibly think of to pray for, and I certainly did want to protect them, but I also didn't want to go to bed. So sometimes my parents had to cut me off. I can also remember as a young child that I prayed for a little sister. I wanted a little sister so bad. And guess what? I got 3 younger brothers. When my mom called me from the hospital and said we were bringing home that 3rd little brother, I said, well, that's okay, Mama. You can just ask God for a girl next year. Oh, me. When I became a teenager, I clearly remember my dad saying, there is a reason God gave your mom only 1 daughter. So God does know best. And really, kidding aside, prayer was such an important part of my family and something that I'm so thankful for that God chose to place me, in that family. It gave me such security, and it really was a foundation, for my relationship with Him. Well, I did a little bit of research on this picture. Is it familiar to any of y'all? Have y'all seen it before? If you have some northern roots, it might, I'll explain that in a minute, be more likely to be seen. I wanted to, it's actually entitled Grace. And when I think of the word grace, really the word that comes to mind to me is the grace that we're given through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That saving grace. But when I looked it up in the context, this photograph, the word grace, which how many of y'all have heard that used as far as a term to say, prayer before meals? The ecclesiastically Latin phrase for that is act of thanks. And clearly it's a visual, act of thanks, I think, there. It was actually taken back in 1918 in the sod house, and this is Charles Weldon, who was a peddler, and he lived in the small northern town of Bovey, Minnesota. It wasn't until the 40s that the daughter of the photographer actually had this made up into prints, and it became more widely known and started to hang in families' homes like mine, my grandma's. But get this, in 2002, the Minnesota State Legislature actually established it as the official photograph of Minnesota. So, when I look at that image, head bowed, hands folded, Bible on the table, as far as what I think about Charles, I think, well, he must have been a very, very religious man, very devout. Well, that's really not what he was known for in his community. In fact, his real life story centered more about drinking and not accomplishing a whole lot. Not long after he was paid $5 in 1926 for waiving his rights to this photograph, he disappeared. The photographer, family, historians tried to track him down, but didn't find any evidence. Yet, this image lives on in many homes. It's a state symbol, and it's a reminder of us to give thanks. God works in amazing ways. As a young girl, I found out that my prayer journey really began before I was even born. I heard my parents tell me many times how they prayed for me before I was born. I found a note when I was a young girl that was actually written by my dad's mom, my grandmother, and it was written before I was born, and it was a letter to me. And it was letting me know that she was praying for me now, and she would be praying for me as a young girl, and that she was praying God's blessings on whatever God had called me to do. And that really stuck with me. The first time I could remember really crying out to God and getting a really big answer to prayer was when my younger brother, the youngest of them, he was only 4 years old, and he was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm. And I can remember running into my room and hitting the bed and putting my face in the pillow and crying out to God, please make him better. And I learned more recently, actually, from my mom, one of his other brothers. This was one of those three. Joel was 6 years old, and he was with a friend during this, traumatic time. And the person that he was with shared that he kept staring out the window and having his own little conversation with God and saying, God, please make my brother better. Please make my brother better. And he did, miraculously. They went into surgery that morning to try to fix the area in the brain, and miraculously it was healed. And that little boy is now, let's see, he's, how old is he, Mama? 51? 51, has two teenagers, and he is serving in the healthcare and medical field now. So just amazing. As a child and as a young woman, I prayed that God would make me a mom of many, many kids. And he'd given me a lot of practice. I had those three younger brothers. So, I was sure that was in the plan. But over many years, I did not become pregnant. And I began to think that prayer was honestly, it was not going to be answered, or in some other way. But it was answered in a way I couldn't have imagined. So at the age of 34, I did have a beautiful little boy. And I can remember having this conversation between God and I was thanking him. I was like, thank you, God, so much for this baby. And I know that I dreamed and I begged you to have lots of kids, but this gift of one baby is enough. And no, this was not a night, the day after a night, I stayed up all night. No, this was just like, I really had this great peace and joy about it, and I was so thankful, and I was so determined that I was going to be a best mom to that one baby. But 13 months later, God blessed me with two more boys, and the doctors really couldn't explain it, but I could. God answers in big ways. And he did prepare me to be a boy mom with all those brothers. Another big prayer on my list was to somehow have my career more directly related to my faith. And I can really look back now, and I can see how God answered that. Really, and again, in a way that I couldn't have imagined. I went to college, majored in English. I wanted to be a reporter. God opened the door for me to do that. Here in Birmingham, the next door opened to oversee marketing efforts for a healthcare company. And about 2 years into it, they decided that they wanted to have a magazine. And they asked me to be the editor. I really did not have that kind of experience, but I saw this as an opportunity to tell some really positive stories, share people's stories, which was my passion. And I said yes. Next came that motherhood. And, as I mentioned, it was a huge prayer for me to be a mom. And I felt like that was very important to me. And I wanted to be with those babies. But my corporate job really wasn't giving me that flexibility. I had to travel a lot. So then entered this idea of a magazine. where I could tell people's faith stories. And bingo, the pieces all came together for me. It was, I received support from local business owners. Some people in here just, like Benji Sawyer back there, as far as he and his family. And then those from my, previous careers as far as connections. And then the stories, they were right here. We had so many abundant faith stories right here in this community, and we still do today. Of course, starting this endeavor with toddlers, they were, it was 1, 1, and 2. You might have thought I lost my mind, but it did give me, that flexibility, to be at home. It gave me that dream of being able to tell other people's faith stories, but don't think that I didn't have some doubts and some questions. I clearly remember one day changing a diaper while I was talking to an advertiser on the phone, and I literally was silently praying, God, please do not let this child cry. Yeah. And then, I'd ask him, like, well, why did you give me this idea now? Why not, like, before kids, when I had, thought I was busy. I wasn't busy. When I had plenty of time. And honestly, it came back pretty quickly to me. It was, you know what, Laurie? You might have tried to take credit for that. And I probably would have. But this was bigger. This was a lot bigger than me. A lot bigger than me. And there were months that I couldn't foresee how the next issue was going to be printed. But guess what? God's bigger. God's bigger than us. During, I want to say within the second year of the publication, I had the opportunity to interview these two women, probably just a couple months apart. People ask me, like, what's the interview that stands out to you? And these interviews really did. So, of course, I was going to meet with Mother Angelica, who started, probably a lot of you know, EWTN, and literally took the gospel across the world, and is continuing long after her passing. That is continuing. And then Jessie Hill Downs, who started the Jimmy Hill Mission with her husband, who died within a year, and then for decades she continued on serving in our community and helping the least of these, quite frankly. So the purpose was an interview, but what stuck with me was both of these women stopped and asked if they could pray for me and pray with me. And they did. And they asked God's blessing upon the work that I was doing with the magazine. And it was such a confirmation of I was right where I was supposed to be. And I was doing what I was supposed to be. Well, within about 2 years of launching the magazines, we were approached in terms of the concept that we had done in Birmingham to take it to other markets. So by year 3, we had gone into our second market. By year 8, we were in about 10 markets, and we were as far west as Denver, Colorado. Can you believe it? About year 10, a big prayer praise came, and then a big prayer challenge to the business. We had growing pains, and money was tight. I can remember reading my Bible one morning, and I was in the Gospels, and I just had this brief thought. I was like, it would be so awesome to go to Israel and, walk where Jesus walked and where he taught, be in those spots. And then right away I said, but I know we don't have any money to do that. I don't have the time to do that. I've got a 10, 11-year-old. I mean, I had all these excuses. Well, no joke. Like a week later, I got a phone call from the Israeli Ministry of Tourism inviting me to go to Israel along with 4 other journalists to see Israel. Yep. And it was amazing. And my parents stayed home with my kids. So sorry. But it was all in, God's timing. Well, toward the end of that year, I went from that mountaintop experience of Israel to literally the pit. After years of praying to God to restore my marriage and trying desperately to fix it, it was not. I became a single mom. I lost my business partner, and I lost my lines of credit. Self-reliance was no longer an option for me at any level. I was doing a lot of that. But God helped me develop a new way of waiting in prayer, and this started a few years in. I feel like he was getting me ready. So I was still talking to him, about my issues, but instead of telling him what I thought should happen, because I truly did not know what the next step should be. I put the issues before him, and this kind of became my mantra was, I can't, you can, and I'm going to let you. So as I started waiting, when frustration or confusion started to build up, I'd stop and I started asking, well, God, what do you think? What do you think? I felt like I had the choice to either trust or to give up, and I couldn't give up. I had 3 kids to raise. I had this business to run that I felt like I was called to run. I had to just keep going back to that short prayer. I can't, you can, and I'm going to let you. Show me. I started spending a lot more time listening and less time talking, which those that know me well know that I love to talk, so that was tough. I started looking, at challenges with more of a curiosity than a dread. All right, so God, what are we going to do here? What are you trying to teach me? And God showed up in some amazing ways. How else could I be standing here, 25 years into this, with a business that really, was shaken to the core. But there's many examples, but I have just a couple that I'm going to share with you. Back in 2012, my phone quit, allowing me to check my messages. So I could still talk, but these voicemails were coming in, I couldn't get them. And you can imagine, trying to run a business, kind of important, be able to check your voicemail. So I remember that morning, kind of kidding to a friend, I was like, I'm really praying about my phone. I can't get my messages off. I cannot afford to have a new phone right now. I really need this phone to last. So I headed to the AT&T store, and, of course, they told me, this phone's on the last leg, but we can pull these, I think we can get these messages off. So there were 2 voicemails on there. One was from my kid's piano teacher. The second was from a woman who left me a message that said, I think I have found your phone. I'm like, found my phone? Well, and then it came back to me 10 months earlier. A family member had lost a brand new phone. Literally, it had come off and landed somewhere on 119, Cahaba Valley Road, thrown off the car, okay? So that's 10 months earlier, okay, in my fix-it mode, I was calling that phone, and we were up and down, 119 looking for it. We never found it. But this woman's message said, my husband has been a part of the project to widen 119, and when they were clearing away the debris, they found this phone. He took it home, plugged it in, and it worked, and your number popped up 1,000,000 times. So we figured it belongs to you. So very quickly, I got in touch with her. I picked up that phone. I headed back to the AT&T store, and he looked at that phone, and he couldn't believe it. He was like, it really looks good to go. And it lasted for months. Yep. Just when I needed it, yeah. In 2018, I really sensed this need that we needed to do a better job of sharing the good news that we had. We had it in the magazine and print, we had the digital, but as far as really pushing out those individual articles and then making it easy for people when they came to our website to be able to search by category, if they wanted to be encouraged in their faith, did they want resources for parenting, whatever that looked like. So we began to invest what was a lot of money to us to make that happen, to improve that. In fact, Scott Elliott, who's in here, I believe, with electromagnetic was crucial to that, and still is today as far as to help us make that happen. But honestly, at that time, I wasn't seeing how that was generating any more revenue, and all of you know, as far as business, when we're investing, we're like, okay, how does this correlate? Well, come 2020, the pandemic, people couldn't get out. We're a free magazine, you pick it up at the grocery store, you pick it up at church, whatever, Chick-fil-A. That was basically cut off. And here's this time when people needed good news, right? We all needed good news more than ever. And because of those things that Scott and his team helped us do, we were able to continue to spread good news. And those advertisers that we had that were trying to relay how they were doing business maybe differently, but still, were serving families, we could help them do it. And God just totally provides. Then I got one more for you, okay? How about the time that I lost my overnight bag, which had my day planner in it, of course, and I still live by a hard copy day planner most of the time. But this is back in 12. And this bag, I've lost it, and I'm thinking, how am I going to do business, without this? I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing in the next hour. Well, he answered, and he turned my mistake of running over my bag and dragging it a couple of miles out of my neighborhood to not just get my day planner back, but to also meet the man who would eventually be my husband. You see, we lived 5 houses apart for 20 years and didn't know each other. God had to have me drag my bag a couple of miles out of the neighborhood onto Caldwell Mill Road so that Adam Franklin could be a good Samaritan and pick up my bag. You can't make this stuff up. Oh my goodness. God really, God's ways are better than my ways. I've come to realize that. And he can even use my mistakes, to carry out his plans. And for me, the best prayer I can pray for myself and those that I love is thy will be done. Thy will be done. And I'm sure as many of you can relate, there's times when we just do not see how the job's going to get done. And then he'll provide what we need. I'm so thankful for the people that God has brought to come alongside me. Family, friends, co-workers, Melissa and Steve, and family Trey and co-worker. There's advertising room. I mentioned Benji and Scott, but there's others I know I'm missing. But as far as that have helped us continue by God's grace to spread good news for 25 years. So I want to take just a minute to reflect. We rarely get just a few minutes to sit quietly. And I thought it might be just a good little exercise to take a look at these questions. I hope you can all see those. But consider reflecting on those questions just for a minute. Is there something you want to thank God for? I learned recently that physiologically, if we are thanking, we cannot at the same time be fearful or worrying. That's pretty powerful. Is there a specific need, that you want to bring before him? Do you have a question you want to ask him? For me, that's been really tough lately. I've wanted to ask, and I have asked over and over, why was one of my brothers, why was he taken this year? He was only 57 and strong believer, living life like a good man. And but God has answers to that. I may not know it this side of heaven, but I can trust him for that. And as we go into the holiday, I'm sure many of you, you're facing things, maybe it's a circumstance that you don't feel like it's going to be great, or someone is missing. Give it to him, share it. He can handle it. And then finally, is there someone you're being prompted to encourage? So I want you all just to take just a couple minutes. There's index cards if you want to write. I'm a person that likes to put my things down, but let's just take a couple of minutes. I think we're good, are we, Kirk? And one or more of those that you may want to just reflect on for a second, and then we'll come right back and close it out. Well, I hope you guys, found that exercise helpful to you. I want to leave you with one final thought. God answers, not always in the way we think would be best, but we can trust that he answers in ways far better than we can imagine. Not always the way we think would be the best, but we can trust that he answers in ways far better than we can imagine. Just take a look at my family. Remember, I wanted to be a mama of so many. Well, now I have 5 sons, and I finally got a daughter. Isn't she beautiful? I just say happy Thanksgiving to all of you and God's blessings.
Thank you, Laurie. Thanks for sharing your journey with us today. Very appropriate. As we all hopefully pause and give thanks for those things that are most important to us.